of the things that I have found as I've done my own grassroots work, I've been an activist for the last 5 years, is that we actually do have more in common than we think when we actually start to talk to each other. The problem is we've been falsely pitted against each other for so long that we're afraid to talk to each other, or we're immediately angry about what we think the other person believes or wants, and frankly, a lot of times what we've been told just isn't true. So to be able to start talking to some of the authors in this book, the people who ultimately contributed to this book, was really a gift. When I started talking to people who identify on the quote-unquote left, it became really apparent that there was a ton that we had in common. We don't agree on everything, and nobody is ever going to do that. But we do have a ton in common that's really, really valuable, and it makes it great in terms of building relationships of trust and fighting for something that we all believe in, which is true education for children who should have a real future. There are some there's not a bad essay in the book. They're all really valuable and interesting, and they were all very carefully edited. All of the authors in the book agreed to very careful editing on my part that would strip away partisan rhetoric or lingo that might turn people away without having them be able to consider the ideas in the essay fully. There are some really, there's some essays that are really going to knock people's socks off, I think. They're not your typical essay. We have a really nice mix of people. We have a couple of lawyers. We have a number of educators at the college level. We have education experts like Sandra Stotsky, who is known for the work she's done on solid standards. And in addition to that, something that I think is really, really important, and that's parents. Really, really well-informed and educated parents who have been doing their research on Common Core, who see what's coming down the pike at them. Morna McDermott, who's...
Okay, folks, and that's someone just talking about Common Core and finding common ground on this subject matter, which I don't think we've been able to, which is the biggest issue. And I think finding common ground is an issue on many things. I was talking prior to this podcast to a friend of mine who owns several charter schools. And we were talking about just basically charter schools and some other stuff. And then we started talking about an issue that I'm going to bring up in a little bit, mental health checks in schools. And he started talking about the role of parenting and how schools should be more involved. And I'm like, what are you, one of those people that believe in community parenting, which he essentially is. And I'm not. I believe that a parent should teach their kids. Now, where I think school can come in is reinforce a lot of that stuff. Unfortunately, he's like, what if your kid's in a little bubble and they never get out to see what the Hispanics are like and what the culture is like? Well, many people want it that way. Unfortunately, that's part of our society. I personally would like my kids to get out. I like taking my kids in the ghetto. I actually, when I moved to Italy, was for them to get away from the materialistic ideas that they had on them. And we lived there for a while. It was an impoverished city. Looked a lot like New York in terms of broken windows at the school, graffiti on the school walls. And it was an eye-opener for them on what society can be like. I'd like for them to go out to the Jewish synagogues, to the Muslim gathering, to Presbyterian, Christian, and so that they can develop their own ideas, their own beliefs in terms of religion. Other parents aren't like that. Other parents are like, no, I just want my kid to learn Catholic. That's it. I don't want the school to reinforce anything else upon them, and I get that. But coming together, finding common ground, and that's one of the hardest issues out there on any subject matter is finding that common ground, which I'm finding more and more. President, he sat there and said, I heard 1/3 of you, I heard 2/3 of you. Not sure how he heard the 2/3, but now he's not going to find that common ground. He's still going to push forward with his agenda because it's what he wants. We, the electorate, we said, hey, guys, find common ground, work together. You weren't doing it when the Dems controlled the Senate, when they controlled the Senate and Congress first, so we replaced them in Congress. They weren't doing it when they had the Senate and the presidency and the Republicans were in Congress. So we said, okay, let's try Republicans in the Senate and Congress and see what happens there. They need to work together. Work together. Find common ground. All right, this is the Uncensored Report. This is Frankie Abbruzzino. It's the one-man show. I do everything from the technical aspects to the website, everything. And you, believe it or not, this is the second time I'm doing this recording today. I got halfway through it, and I realized my microphone wasn't turned in. So I had to start all over. So now I'm sort of pushed for time because I got to finish this by 10 for it to be uploaded and ready to go by 11. So I might have to skip some material that I wanted to cover that I thought was essential. And I still do think is essential, but essentially what we're going to do is just ignore it until the, I wanted to talk about, some of this stuff I can summarize, like Loretta Lynch. I wanted to talk about her. I had a video on her. Essentially, she's a firm believer in everything that Eric Holder is a believer in. She's one of these people that are going to go out there and continue with Holder's agenda. Do we want someone like that in the AG seat? I don't think so. I think Holder was horrible. He was a race baiter. He was probably the worst attorney general I've ever seen. And he still is because he's still in the spot. Do we want someone that's going to follow in his footsteps? I don't. And I hope the Republicans challenge this Lynch. Because she's obviously liberal. She's someone Obama's appointed. Someone that Obama wants to go out there and do his will. Put his will out there upon the people. And our highest law enforcement officer should not be following the political line so much. They need to look at it, almost like the Supreme Court. They need to look at it and say, it's not a right or left issue. This is what we need to do. This is what the tack we need to take. We need to be independent of the presidency, which I don't think Holder has been. So it'll be interesting to see what the Republicans do on that issue. But right now, I'm gonna skip around a lot from where we were at. Obamacare, I did want to touch on it. They did come out. There's the Supreme Court decided to hear a challenge on the legal challenge to the Affordable Health Care Act, which we will call Obamacare. And it's scheduled to go before them. And they decided to hear the case on whether or not the law authorizes government to subsidize health insurance premiums for the low and middle class people, which a lot of people have been saying they don't. Again, this is a tax. If you're being taxed, why is the government subsidizing the tax? Because didn't the Supreme Court come in and say this is indeed a tax? So there's been this dispute between federal appeals courts over the subsidies, with one court in Virginia ruling that the tax credit should be extended to people in all 50 states. Then you had the appeals court in D.C. that they ruled that the way the law is written, subsidies are only available to people taking part in the state-run exchanges. So last month, the full appeals court in D.C. voted to rehear the case and tossed out the panel's prior decision about the subsidies. In comes the Supreme Court, and they're going to look it over. They decided to take the case due to the timely nature of it, along with the fact that it involves billions of dollars and millions of people. So we're going to see. This could be detrimental to Obamacare, folks, because that's what it's all about, the subsidies. Obamacare is going to thrive with the subsidies. You take away the subsidies, there's going to be issues. In comes the change in the Congress and Senate. We had McConnell and Bonehead Boyner up there for years saying we want to defeat Obamacare. We're going to do everything we can to bring this down. They had some ceremonious votes that they knew weren't going anywhere. Then the next thing you know, McConnell standing up there after we win both houses and said, I don't know if we can get rid of Obamacare, which upset a lot of people. Look, the time for Republican self-congratulation is over. Now they need to get to work. And it appears that the majority of the voting population recognizes that our country's in dire condition. Time is running out to fix it. Are Republicans going to work for our country or shift money around to different special interests? Think about it. It's not reassuring that some Republican Party strategists think they won because they purged the controversial candidates who might have had a campaign gaffe, or the Democrats who seem confident that the Republicans will work together with them to continue their progressive agenda. Or else Obama will pull out that pen and paper, the pen and phone, whatever he says. But the bottom line is Republicans can no longer blame Harry Reid for the failure to repeal or defund Obamacare. Now the budget's already in until next September? So you can't defund anything this year, but you can certainly going forward. They can't just take symbolic votes and complain when bills get bottled up in the Senate. It's their time. It's their time to step up now. Loss of access to physicians. Financial pain everybody's feeling. Hospitals and diversions of physicians. All kinds of issues. Compliance bureaucracy. People are losing doctors. Obamacare is treated as though it's like a Medicaid program. No doctors want to take it on. So you got these people out there paying $500. They get $300 in subsidies. They're paying $200 for medical care that they thought they had, but many doctors are like, we can't help you. Then how about the people that have been always paying their premiums and they can't find doctors because there's a short supply of doctors? And it's now taking me 2-3 months to get in, and what used to, I could almost make a call that day and get in. Every mandate and every dollar taken from the taxpayers is income to somebody, to the managed cartels, information technology vendors, government bureaucracies. And with every day that passes, Obamacare thus becomes more deeply rooted and harder to get rid of, folks. Characterized implementation, selective waivers, political motivated delays, blatant rewriting of the law. We're tired of it. Congress needs to start now. There's several things they could do. And several things they should demand. I have a whole list of them. It's a long way to constitutionally limited government, fiscal solvency, an atmosphere of freedom in which Americans can thrive and prosper. But we need to take some small steps to begin this journey now, folks. Will the Republicans step up? Will the Republicans step up and take this journey? I don't know. I have my reservations about it. I'm not confident it will happen. Now, another issue I wanted to talk about is just the economic collapse, or the predicted one. The Athens. Could Athens be here in the United States? Could Atlanta be the next Athens? With violence, rioting, looting, economic collapse, civil unrest. Can you see it happening in Atlanta or in Tampa? This isn't some dystopian movie plot, folks, but something else according to The Economist. And there's this one guy. This guy's got a pretty good track record here. Martin Armstrong. He correctly predicted the 1987 Black Monday crash. He correctly predicted the 1998 Russian financial implosion. And now he's saying, hey, civil unrest in America by 2016, precipitated by economic collapse, the magic ingredient. Law in the U.S. has really gone nuts, he says, citing the recent case of a 90-year-old guy who, in Florida, on the East Coast, was arrested for feeding homeless. Since then, 2 others have been arrested. They have this law, basically, that they put on the books saying you cannot share your food. My daughter could be in the park, say, hey, you know what? My dad made me 2 sandwiches. I'm not hungry. Hey, there's a guy that hasn't eaten in 5 days. Let me give it to him. She could get arrested. And the Good Samaritan plight isn't even the most striking example of laws gone wild, folks. We've also heard about a 6-year-old charged with sexual harassment because he gave young Susie a kiss on the peck, or cheek, a peck on the cheek. How about the lemonade stands that the kids do on the streets? My kids did it all the time. Now police are being issuing tickets because they're unlicensed, making them close down. Or the guy that makes a gun out of a Pop-Tart or his finger and gets sent home under zero tolerance. Citizens aren't allowed to use imaginary weapons, but Big Brother, they have real ones. And it's a whole different matter then, folks. And what would precipitate an economic collapse? Many observers have warned our runaway spending, loose monetary policy, that it's a ticking time bomb out there. QE, zero interest. They're saying we're in another housing bubble, the stock market bubble. Many would respond to this they'd respond to it in ways our founding fathers would have. Our founders came out. They created a Republican form of government. And with this form, there's a constitution prescribing limited federal powers. We increasingly operate more and more like a democracy out there, folks. Today's Americans think that Congress has the constitutional authority to do anything as long as they vote on it and get the majority. But that's not the case. And what they vote to do is buy votes through spending and racking up debt, and then finance the debt with the printing of money, as we saw characterized by the Federal Reserve Bank, which is private, folks. It's not federal. It's a banksters-owned, foreign bankster-owned company, private company. And they're empowered somehow, without any audits, they're empowered to go out there and flood the economy with dollars. And it's backed by nothing but good faith in the credit of the United States government. It's basically a legalized counterfeit operation that's out there. You know, this QE3, which finally ended. They were doing $85 billion a month, printing of money. And then this year they started doing $10 billion less. Now it's all gone. Since the new paper isn't backed by gold and hasn't been accompanied by a corresponding increase in economic output, it's essentially a fiat currency. Now, what is a fiat currency? Fiat currency is essentially funny money that dilutes the value of the dollar in your pocket. More dollars plus same actual wealth equals less wealth represented by each greenback. And the result is this. A century ago, the dollar was valued at 100 cents when you put it up against gold or silver. Today, it's worth about 4 cents. Devalued. Inflation of the money supply. And, you know, some might say, oh, there's no inflation rate. That's because Bill Clinton, the administration, popped in, and what they did is they stopped including the cost of food and fuel into the calculation of the inflation rate to hide the true impact of rising prices. Now, call me crazy, but how is it that food is not included in the inflation rate? I mean, go to this grocery store. You're going to have supermarket sticker shock, folks. The collapse of the economy. You know, if history is any guide, you should look at stuff like the Weimar Republic in Germany. They were burdened with reparations to pay back France, United States, and everybody after the nation's defeat in World War I. The government started printing marks to finance this debt. The result was 30,000% rise in the rate, economic turmoil, social unrest, and the rise of Adolf Hitler. Of course, some will sit there and say, yeah, you know, the United States. It's not like a Hungary or Zimbabwe. But we should seriously wonder what we will do tomorrow if we won't stop digging the economic grave with credit cards, counterfeit cash, cloaked compassion, folks. We're a debt-ridden society. Why? Why does the government push us so much to build all this debt? Bush did it. Obama does it. Go out there, be patriotic, support America. Spend your money. Don't save your money. Why? It's the craziest thing I've ever heard, folks. We're going to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Is your money manager giving you safety and security? Wouldn't you like to make your money work harder for you? Then you should consider joining philsgang.com, where thousands of individual investors have successfully profited.
This year I'm up 60% on my portfolio. Following your system has been fantastic. I've been with you for about a month and a half now, and I'm already up 7%.
I've been in the business for a long time, and you're really one of the best I've ever heard.
Well, I just want to let you know what a great teacher you are.
For over a decade, philsgang.com's Phil Grandy and Donald Cogswell have been teaching, coaching, and investing right along with all Phil's Gang members.
I want to thank Donnie for market wrap. I bought 2,500 shares of AUI and sold it this morning at $820 profit.
Why not join thousands of satisfied Phil's Gang customers today? Go to philsgang.com, philsgang.com, or call 877-600-4264. That's 877-600-4264. Call today.
All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about boots on the ground. Today is the Marines' birthday. I think it's the 239. So Semper Fi, my buddies out there. I'm an ex-vet of the Navy. As I used to always fool my Marine buddies, hey, we write your checks. You guys work for us. They hate that. Those Marines do. All right, so basically, boots on the ground. There's more boots on the ground in Iraq. Okay, so is this a sign that Obama's failed policies? This authorization would bring the number of personnel advisors to over 3,000, so we're starting to build it up. And it further undermines his insistence that the U.S. campaign against the ISIS militants will not involve American boots on the ground. On Friday, he authorized this deployment of another 1,500 troops to Iraq. It'll cost about $5.6 billion and will more than double the size that's there now. Does this tell us that his agenda, his objective, what his policy was, that the Iraq war is over, let's pull them all out, was the wrong decision? That's led to all the chaos that's over there. That's led to the growth of ISIS. You know, they're going to go in there in the military. They're going to establish several sites across Iraq. They're going to train these brigades of Iraqis to try to sit there and fight. The same brigades that ran, that gave all of our equipment away. Is it a smart decision? I don't know. But here's the problem we're faced with, the crux of the situation that is even more concerning. It's the GOP. And I think I covered this last week. Does the GOP mean more wars? Does Republican control the Senate expand the neocon wars in Syria and Iraq? Boots on the ground. I mean, think about it. They're the ones that have been pushing for this. Ron Paul thinks so. Ukraine, that was all neocon driven. Syria, neocon driven. One might think that Republican control both the House and Congress would make things more difficult for the president of the opposing party to have his policy matters of foreign trade and foreign policy pushed through. But that's not the case. That's not the case. You know what's happening is you got a Republican-controlled House, all right, and Senate. They're neocons. They're war hungry. I'm not sure why, but they are. And if you look at some of the examples, Republican control both houses of Congress, it would make things more difficult for a president, like I said, but it's not. And here's why. It was Republican congressmen who gave President Clinton the lion's share of his votes that he needed to pass NAFTA, the job-killing NAFTA. It was opposed by organized labor, congressional Democrats, but the Republicans were there. And they helped Bill Clinton out, and they got it through. They helped Bill Clinton on the air war over Kosovo, carried out without authorization from Congress. The Republican House voted 3 times against the military campaign, but otherwise did nothing about it. They chose instead to impeach the president for perjury committed during the investigation on that whole Luanda case, the sex case. I forget her name. The Republican takeover of the Senate might well move the country back towards the mindset of the Bush era when support of the invasion of Iraq was widely taken as a show of patriotism. You have Tom Cotton of Arkansas. He's distinguished himself as the party's most aggressive advocate for military action overseas. I sort of think McCain is, but some believe Tom Cotton is. And it's not imminent. Look, a prudent nation would respond differently to possible future threat than to say something's imminent. You have Obama up there. He gave a speech, I think it was in September. He said that while we have not yet detected specific plotting against our homeland, ISIL leaders have threatened America and our allies. So we got to go in there. We got to take care of them. It's a threat to our homeland. But isn't it just in the realm of theory, not fact? It should serve as a reminder that the war in Iraq was all about Saddam Hussein. What he could do with these alleged weapons of mass destruction. He could pass some of those weapons to terrorist groups who could use them. Now, they said they never found them, but then just recently we see where several soldiers came in contact with them and they found them. The problem was that the United States was supplying them, United States companies. So they didn't want the word to get out. We couldn't wait for definitive proof about these weapons because the smoking gun might turn out to be a mushroom-shaped cloud, basing an invasion on such shadowy and ill-informed possibilities brought to the United States and our allies, that whole war resulted in dead up in the trillions, more than 4,000 dead, 32,000 Americans wounded. Tomorrow's Veterans Day, and you think of these people. It devastated Iraq. It devastated that whole region. In the war's wake came a power vacuum that created ISIS. Yeah, they're the ex-Shia, Ba'athist, Al-Qaeda of Iraq. Going where, with what, and how long? These are the questions which we will not likely get satisfactory answers to when the President and Congress come to the meeting of their minds on war authorization. And such resolutions tend to be broadly written and subject to expansive interpretation, folks. Just like the Vietnam Resolution became for Johnson administration the functional equivalent of a declaration of war. President Obama was said repeatedly that he will not send U.S. ground forces to Iraq or Syria, but it seems like the new AUMF he seeks will be ambiguous enough to permit him to interpret the authorization of ground troops as he wants. It is easy to overlook just how deeply our nation has become immersed in the hopeless maze in the Middle East wars and political conflicts over the past few decades. 14 Muslim nations the United States has bombed since 1980. No wonder they hate us. They're surrounded by our bases. Iran's surrounded by our bases, yet we're the ones that are being aggressive, or they're the ones that are being aggressive, according to our president. Despite their stated threats and brutal acts, none of the fanatical groups we have been bombing or fighting in the Middle East have posed any issues here in the United States. Except Iraq, we took care of that. Or Al-Qaeda. So assuming that we can't kill them all, will all of our bombing in Iraq and Syria prevent some individual groups or people from going on a terrorist mission? No, it will make them more likely to do it. It will make them more likely. Another open-ended resolution authorizing the president to take whatever military action he deems necessary will further sowing the winds, and will reap more whirlwinds, folks. And we should be concerned about this. All right, next I'm trying to do this without any commercials based upon this whole first show thing not working out. Next, we're going to talk about mental health testing for school kids. And this is something that, like I said, I was talking to my buddy that owns a few charter schools before the show. I asked him about this. You know, he's all for it. I noted my concerns. He was pretty adamant. And, you know, one thing I brought up is, Tom and myself were horrendous in school. If someone were to do a mental analysis on myself or Tom, they would have said, these guys are crazy, put them on meds. These guys are crazy, don't give them a gun. Lo and behold, Tom's become a successful lawyer, owner of several charter schools. I think I'm successful. So can you really do that? And is this possibly, just possibly, using gun violence as a cover? You know, the Obama administration has quietly unleashed a cache of federal dollars that will be used for testing students for signs of mental health issues. You know, some say that personal information scooped up by the screenings will be logged into some centralized database that will follow the child throughout his or her academic career and beyond. Public schools, they will get infused with more than $150 million in federal grants to further this agenda. And it's all under the auspice of the Obama 2013 executive action titled, Now is the Time to Do Something About Gun Violence. This was all taken after Sandy Hook, folks. And the goals that came out of the Biden Task Force were strengthen background checks and systems for guns, require background checks for gun sales, pass new stronger ban on assault weapons, limit ammo, gun control. Make sure the schools are safer with new resource officers, counselors, better emergency response plans, and nurturing school climates. Ensure quality of mental health treatment, particularly for our young. Last two measures are where the mental health screening for students come in. And comes the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS. And they have announced $99 million in federal grants to school districts for mental health services. It'll be used to train new mental health providers, help teachers and others recognize mental health issues in the youth, and connect them to help increase access to mental health services for the young. Department of Education, they announced $70 million in school climate transformation grants. What the goal is to measure stuff as connecting children, youth, and families to appropriate services and support. And what I'm afraid, and what many are afraid of, is this is a dangerous trend, folks. Are they sitting there and basically going with that statement of never let a good crisis, such as a school shooting, go to waste? Because what this appears to be is part of a broader goal of focusing education less on academic knowledge and more on students' feelings, their mindsets, their attitude, their social and emotional learning. The problem is even more concerning in light of the recent attempts to create a state database of student information with Common Core, which will be eventually linked together as part of the DOE's plan for a nationwide database. Then you got places like Rhode Island. They're linking DNA collection on newborns to its education database, meaning each child will be tracked. What's more concerning to some privacy rights advocates is that the state is taking the DNA collections from babies without even getting consent, folks. This is craziness. And like I said, Tom will tell you this, and he'll attest to it, and I'll attest to it too. When we were in high school, I would have probably been deemed mentally off base. I was a wild child. A lot of times I think schools use that as an excuse. A child is hyperactive, ADHD. Throw some medicine down. Let's calm them down. Let's put them in a fog, a mental fog. This should concern you, folks. It concerns me deeply, deeply. All right, we're going to talk about... Actually, let me take a break. I got to take some water, and we'll be right back in a second. Get some of this great apparel from theroguegrant.com or the Uncensored Report or thevintagescoop.com. We have hats, shirts, coffee mugs. They say educate, inspire, and change. Or for my Scoop fans, it'll say the Vintage Scoop, Sarasota Scoop, etc. Help me with this operation so I can continue to get a fresh perspective on the news out to the masses. Thanks a lot, and have a great day. Just go to my website and click on the icon. All right, we're back, folks. Now we're going to talk a little bit about immigration reform. As we all know, the president wants to push through his amnesty. Millions of jobs will be lost. The funding, financial drain it's going to cause is tremendous. And you're seeing it now with just many of these illegals going into the schools. The schools now have to pay, instead of having one child per 20 or whatever the ratio is, they got 1 per 40, so they got to hire more teachers. We got to pay welfare. We got to pay health care. It's all adding up. So you sit there and with all the talk that President Barack Obama is going to grant amnesty and give millions of illegal aliens, basically give them citizenship through an executive order. And the desire of others to secure the borders. What are we going to do to secure this so that more don't come in? Very little is said about what would be the single most effective step Congress could take on immigration reform. You know, I think the House and Senate passed something, but they couldn't come to terms on what they passed at one point. What'll happen is this step to come together on immigration reform would be a return to the original intent of the 14th Amendment as to what constitutes a natural-born citizen, which is one of the biggest issues out there. You know, someone right now can come here, have a baby, that baby's born on U.S. soil, and boom, he's getting citizenship. He's getting all the welfare, every dime the United States can throw his way. Without that step, all efforts to control the nation's borders are ultimately doomed to failure, folks, so we need to look at this step. Should the United States recognize that a person born inside the borders of the U.S. is a natural citizen? Many people believe out there that it's a myth, and that the authors of the 14th Amendment wish to have all persons born on the U.S. soil automatic citizens is just a myth. And that the Constitution doesn't say this, so where did it come about? A child born to an illegal alien on American soil becomes an anchor baby. The parent parent's ticket to legal status. These babies are considered citizens. They're entitled under U.S. law to welfare benefits. So while the law may bar illegal aliens from most government assistance, the U.S.-born children of illegals have full legal status, folks. A better understanding of the 14th Amendment requires an examination of its clear wording, historical context, in which it was drafted, and the intent of the framers. Basically, the amendment states that all persons born or unnaturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. The phrase, subject to jurisdiction thereof, is simply ignored by those promoting the concept of open borders. And clearly, the framers of the 14th Amendment intended that only children born in the country, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are considered born citizens. So basically, hey, I mean, what they're doing is they're ignoring that one part. If your mother is here, subject to jurisdiction thereof, they're considered natural born citizens if the baby's born. It didn't mean foreigners come here, have babies, they're citizens, and take off. What do you think on this issue? In the war between states, there's no clear definition of citizen apart from citizen of the United States. In the aftermath of the war, the passage of the 13th Amendment basically abolished the institution of slavery. Many former slaves were something of a legal limbo. Many northern members of Congress expressed concern over the passage of the southern state governments of various laws that were designed to keep ex-slaves in position as close to slavery as they could, which led Congress to pass the Civil Rights Act in 1866. And this act required states to recognize the basic civil rights of the former slaves. And the purpose was clearly to make citizens of the former slaves, not children of the foreigners who happened to be inside the borders of the United States, folks. It strains. It strains the credibility. How about believe them that American Indians, whose ancestors had lived within the border of the United States for centuries before the first English settlements and the founding of us republic, they were not considered citizens under the terms of the amendment, but the children of illegals are considered natural-born citizens. How is that? If American Indians were considered foreigners and not citizens of birth under the 14th Amendment, it's reasonable to conclude that the children of illegal aliens likewise be excluded, right? For years, the clear intent of the 14th Amendment was little questioned. In 1872, the California Supreme Court demonstrated that it clearly understood the obvious intent of the 14th Amendment in a ruling of Van Valkenburg versus Brown, where the court upheld the purpose of the amendment was to confer the status of citizenship upon persons domiciled within the limits of the United States who could not be brought in within the operation of the naturalization laws because of native born, and whose birth, though native, had at the same time left them without the status of citizenship. Such persons were not white persons, but in the main were of African blood, who had been held in slavery in the country. Some good food for thought there, folks. Food for thought there. Let's see. Do I have time to cover one more issue? We covered boots on the ground, mentally, immigration reform I wanted to talk about. We talked about Loretta Lynch. This is something I wanted to touch on. I should have touched on it earlier. It's on the pressure the U.S. Treasury is putting on foreign banks, basically to report U.S. citizens. And what's happening is U.S. citizens are saying, "Forget this. I'm taking off. I don't want my citizenship anymore." And many U.S. citizens will say, "What the hell? Pay your taxes." But they don't get the crux of the situation. And here it is. And my dad is one of the primary people. My dad immigrated here from Italy. Had us. When I was about 4, him and my mother divorced, and he went back to Italy. He hasn't been back here since. In 45 years? He has not stepped foot on the U.S. ground. He's dead now, but He lived and worked in Italy and in Germany. He was a citizen there in Italy. I think he even had some German citizenship. So he worked there. He paid taxes there. He never came back to the United States. He never got any benefits from the United States. He didn't get retirement. He didn't get Social Security. He didn't get welfare. He didn't get anything from the United States. And that's what many of these people are going through right now, folks. They're over there. They're overseas. They haven't, they were born here. Some of these people were born here. They went to the, let's say, Italy when they were 1, have never been back here, but the U.S. wants tax dollars from them. And they're forcing these foreign banks to give the financial information to them, or they're going to get a 30% penalty on their monies. And you know what's funny about this, the irony is, if a foreign bank were to come here, or a foreign government, and tell a U.S. bank, hey, we want information on this shareholder, they tell them to get lost. And no other country goes out there and tries to tax their citizens that are working and living in another country. It's something privy to the United States. And it's all because of this act. What is it? I forget what's the name of the act? Here it is. The Foreign Account Compliance Act. And it's infecting 100,000 foreign financial institutions out there. Passed back in 2010 to catch what they call tax dodgers. Now, some people are people that live here and they're funneling money over to foreign countries. I get that. We want to crack down on it. I understand that. My biggest issue is the person that was born here, left here, hasn't been here for years, yet they want them to pay taxes for goods and services that they are not they're not getting. They're not benefiting from. So why should they? Why should they? I know I didn't benefit from them. My mom raised us 5 kids. We got some welfare and stuff, but that was primarily because of my mom, not my dad. All right, that's been the show. The Uncensored Report. I named it the Uncensored because I try not to censor it. And what you find is on mainstream media, a lot of the communications they put out are censored by their corporate owners, by corporate interests, government interests, and other interests out there. Like if you were at, I think it was in the news last week, where the Obama administration at the White House was telling press reporters not to report the possible Ebola victims out there. And they were dictating what they could and couldn't report. And I started seeing it here locally, where I would sit here and tell the mainstream local media, hey, this is a situation, this is somebody that works here, they're in the know, this is pretty damn accurate. They would ask the spokesperson of the government organization, they would deny, and they say, oh, so we're not going to look into it. There was no investigative reporting there. And it was their producers. The reporter might have wanted to do it, but the producers are like, no, we're not going to go near that. It's too controversial. We don't want to touch it. All right, this has been the Uncensored Report. This is Frankie Abbruzzino, and we will see you tomorrow at 11. Everybody have a great day.